Hello and welcome to the installation video for the multiplayer quiz app built on Salesforce Technology. So today I'm going to tell you how you can install this application, and it's actually two applications that we're going to install. First of all, we're going to set up a Scratch org with the host application, and then we're going to install the player application on Heroku. Both of these applications are built on Lightning Web Components. One of them is on-platform and the other is off-platform. All right, without any further ado, let's start. So we're going to jump in the installation section that is listed on the GitHub repository of the host app, and let's take a look at that. So here we see a bit of information about the details about how this is set up, but what we're going to look at are the steps. So the first thing you need to do is to make sure that your Salesforce DX environment is set up. Mine is already set up, so I won't have to do that. You will need the Salesforce CLI. There's going to be a lot of commands that are going to be run. The good thing is that we've built a script for you that will automate all of that, so you have very little type. But this is all needed to make sure that you can easily deploy this environment without taking a lot of time to configure all of it with clicks. So you'll need the CLI. You do not need VS Code, for example. This is not required. You won't have to code anything. You will need a developer hub, so you can set this up on a free developer edition. Here you have the link to sign up for a free developer edition. You'll need to authenticate with your dev hub with the Salesforce CLI, which is this command. I've already done all of this, so I won't show you that. I will jump directly to step number 2 here, and I'm going to continue the instructions here. So the first thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to clone this GitHub repository with all the source code for the host app. So I'm going to jump to a terminal here. I'm going to paste the command that I have, and this is going to clone my host app. Just wait a few seconds for it to clone. Then I'm going to go inside this application folder, quiz host app, and from there I'm going to be able to continue with the instructions. All right. So the second step here is actually the most complex, but it's very simple to run. The third step, actually step number 3, is to run one of these installation scripts. Now the script does a lot of things for you, so it's going to run a lot of commands, but you just have to run either this one or this one. In my case, I'm running on Mac OS, so I just have to run this particular one here. And what this does is that it will create a Scratch org for me with the quiz alias, and it will pre-install a set of sample questions. There's going to be 3 questions that are going to be preloaded, and you're going to be able to see later on that you can import additional questions. So for example, there will be a set of questions for admins, another set for developers, and maybe some for general users. But let's start with the sample installation first. So I'm going back to my terminal here. I'm going to paste this new command here, install dev quiz sample. Make sure that you're inside the quiz host app folder here so that it can find the installation, the script. All right, I'm running this. It will confirm my settings. It will try to clear any previously deployed Scratch orgs. So if you already had one, it will erase it to install a new one. It will create a Scratch org. This can take some time depending on the status of the platform. All right, so now my Scratch org is created. You can see that I have my username displayed here with some sort of random characters. It's now going to try to push sources, so it's going to take all my Apex classes, my Lightning Web Components, my configuration, and deploy them to my Scratch org. This again can take a bit of time because there are quite a few files there. There we go, so the files are deployed. I'm assigning a permission set to the current user, and then I'm importing the sample data for the questions and session. Then I'm generating a password for our user, and the quiz is installed. So just before I show you the org itself, which just opened automatically, I will go back to the result of the script here. And one thing that is important to note is the password that was generated. So you'll have a password here that was generated with one of the last commands before you see the installation completed. And this particular password will need you'll need to use it later on in the configuration. So make sure you save it, and also make sure that you save the username as well. You'll also use that later. All right. So once the installation is completed, this opens the org that was generated. So you can see here, this is the name of my Scratch org here, and we'll need that later. But for now, let's continue with the instructions. All right, so we've completed step number 3. We're going to jump to step number 4. The first thing we need to do is to generate a security token for our user. This is also something we'll need to refer to in a new configuration after. So to do that, you want to go into your org, click on your avatar, go in settings here, not the setup, settings for this particular user. You'll want to click on reset my security token. There you go. And this will send you an email with the new security token. Then, step number 5. You'll need to generate a password for the using this particular service here. I'm going to open that in the new tab. And the password you'll generate here is going to be used as a secret quiz API key. This is some sort of key that lets you pair the Salesforce org with the Heroku org, so that only the Salesforce org can send command to the Heroku application, the player application. All right, so here we can see here that this is just a password generator, so we can generate a password on the fly, and we'll need to save that because we're going to be using this in several steps now. All right, so I'll just leave it there for now. I can move on to step number 6. Step number 6 is where we generate and deploy the player app on Heroku. So I'm going to open that in a new tab by clicking on this deploy to Heroku button. And this is already preloaded with certain settings. So first of all, I'll need to provide a name for my application. So I can just say quiz demo. All right, I need to find something that is available. So I'll just say quiz demo 20, for example. That's gonna be fine. App owner, region, etc. Now, this is the most important part, the configuration variables. So here you have to set up a couple of configuration variables. Now, the information on how to fill those fields here is listed in the README. So you just have to read what is here. The first one is a quiz API key. That's the one we generated in step number 5. That's the one that we have here. So I'm going to copy that and I'm going to place that here. Next thing is the login URL. So if you're just using a Scratch org as per the default instructions, you can leave that as is. Next step is the password. So this is the Salesforce user password. I have it in my command here. That's this one. So I can just paste that here. The next one is the security token for my user. So remember, you got that through an email. So that's going to be a string of text that I'm copying from my emails here and placing here. That's it. And a username. So this is also something you have in the command line here. And there we go. That's it. Our configuration is complete. Last thing to do is to click on deploy app, and this creates the environment. So this is going to take some time. I'm not going to look at this for the moment, and we can continue with the instructions in the meantime. So yeah. Back to the README. So we've completed step number 6 and step number 7. We've configured the Heroku application. The next step is to minify the Heroku application URL. And here we have a link to another service that will let us do that. So I'm not using the traditional bit.ly here. I'm using bit.do, which is another thing which is quite similar, because this one lets you actually provide a readable short link. So I can easily type something like quiz demo here and without having to pay a subscription on Bitly. All right, now I need to get the URL for my Heroku application. It's still deploying right now, but I can get it. No, I can't get it. So I'll have to wait for it to be deployed. And we're going to see that when it starts, it's going to connect to Salesforce. So you want to be extra careful here to look at the messages at the end. You're going to see connected to Salesforce. If you've mistyped the settings in the environmental variables, it may fail to connect to Salesforce. All right, so now we can see the app was successfully deployed. We can click on View here, and this will open the app. So just wait for it to start. This is running on a free Heroku account, and what this means is that there is a warm-up time. So you want to be careful when you run the game to first click on that link. And for the first time you access it, if you haven't accessed it in a couple of minutes, it's going to take some time to load. But once it has loaded, it's quite fast. So what we need to do is to take this URL here, which is our player app URL, and this is what we'll minify in the next step. So I'm going to shorten that link here, and there we go. I'm going to shorten it. So I can take this short URL here, and I'm going to be able to use it for the next instructions. So this was step 8. I've minified my Heroku app URL. And then step number 9, I'm going to go back to my Salesforce org, and I'm going to go in remote site settings, and I'm going to allow my Salesforce org to connect to the Heroku application. So my Salesforce org is still here. I want to go in setup. Let me close that. I want to go in remote site settings, so just type remote here in the quick find. Oops, remote site settings under security. And I want to add a new remote site. For the site name, I can just say Quiz Player App. That's fine. The name doesn't really matter. What is really important here is the URL. So I'm going to copy paste this URL here from the entire URL of my quiz app, and I'm going to paste it here, and then I save it. So now I have specified my remote site settings. Let's move on to the next step. The next step is to go, step number 10, is to create a custom metadata type, which allows us to configure the app settings. So there are three fields we'll need to set up: the player app URL, which is the full URL for the Heroku application, the player app URL minified, which is the minified URL for the Heroku app, and finally the quiz API key. That's the one we generated in step number 5. So back to our org, we go here in the setup and go type in the quick find, and we go in custom metadata types. Here we see that we have deployed a quiz settings metadata type. And what we want to do here is to manage records for this particular custom metadata type. By default, we do not ship any values here. And it's up to you to create a new value for this quiz settings. So let me do that. The label doesn't matter. I'm just going to say quiz settings. That's perfectly fine. Now, what is really important here are the 3 fields: the player app URL minified, and the quiz API key. All right, let's start with the player app URL. So this is the full Heroku app URL. I'm going to paste that in here. Then the minified URL, which is this one here, bitdo URL. I'm going to paste this one here. And finally, the quiz API key, which I still have here. And there we go. Now, it is super important that the quiz API key matches on both the Heroku side and the Salesforce side. If they don't match, you won't be able to play the game correctly. Now, when I have saved my settings, and there we go. All right. So we're done with this step. This was step number 10. We've completed the installation. Let's just make sure that everything runs now. Later on, once you've tested the installation, you can additionally import other questions and replace the sample questions with your own.